My name is Samuel, though for the last 10 years the world has known me as Father Sam. My face has been on the cover of inspirational books, my voice a soothing baritone on a nationally syndicated television show, a moment of grace. I am, or rather I was, a purveyor of hope, a brand of faith packaged for mass consumption. I am writing this now, long after the studio lights have gone dark, using a simple pen and notebook, because the truth I was shown cannot be contained in a 60-minute television slot or a 10-step guide to happiness. It is a truth so vast and terrifying and beautiful that it broke me, and in breaking me, it saved me from the man I had become. My life before my public death was a masterpiece of production. It was a carefully crafted narrative of accessible faith. I lived in a penthouse apartment in Los Angeles with a view that stretched to the Pacific. My days were not governed by the liturgical calendar, but by production schedules, media interviews, and book deadlines. I didn't have parishioners, I had a demographic. I didn't wrestle with the dark night of the soul. I workshopped uplifting anecdotes with my producers. The God I spoke of was a benevolent life coach, a divine source of positivity whose primary interest was in helping my viewers achieve their best lives now. And people loved it, they needed it. My ratings were phenomenal. I was a good man, I told myself. I brought comfort to millions. I donated a portion of my substantial income to charity. But deep down, in the quiet moments after the cameras were off and the adoring crowds were gone, a profound emptiness gnawed at me. My faith, which had begun as a genuine, searching fire in a small seminary in Ohio, had become a product. It was polished, tested in focus groups, and stripped of all its difficult, inconvenient, and terrifying edges. I spoke of light, but I refused to acknowledge the existence of the shadows from which that light derived its meaning. I was a chef who had forgotten the taste of real food. I remember a meeting in a glass-walled conference room high above Sunset Boulevard. It was with my producer, Jenna, and 2 network executives. Jenna was sharp, savvy, and had been instrumental in crafting the Father Sam brand. She was sliding a series of charts across the polished table. "The numbers for the last quarter are fantastic, Sam," she said, her voice crisp with professional satisfaction. "The 35 to 54 female demographic is through the roof. The new book, The Sunrise of the Soul, is tracking to debut at #1. We're discussing a new line of grace, journals, and daily meditation apps." The executives nodded, their smiles as bright and artificial as the studio lighting. "We just need you to keep doing what you're doing, Father," one of them said. "Keep it light, keep it hopeful. People are tuning in to feel good." I smiled back, the practiced, gentle, reassuring smile that had sold millions of books. "Of course," I said, "the mission is to uplift." Inside, however, I felt a familiar, chilling sense of fraudulence. I was a lifeguard describing the beauty of the ocean to people who were drowning, assuring them that if they just thought positively, they would float. I was a spiritual salesman, and I was my own best customer, having long ago bought into the comforting, profitable illusion I was selling. That illusion was about to be shattered in the most public way imaginable. It was a Thursday, during a live tapping of A Moment of Grace. The studio audience was warmed up, their faces upturned and shining with adoration. The theme of the show was letting go of fear. I was in the middle of a particularly moving monologue, my voice modulated to convey just the right amount of gentle authority and heartfelt sincerity. The set was a cozy, fake living room, designed to feel intimate and safe. 3 cameras were trained on me, their little red lights glowing like malevolent eyes. And so, you see, I was saying, my hands spread in a gesture of open-hearted offering, fear is just a shadow. It has no substance. It cannot touch the divine light that resides within each and every one of you. You just need to turn toward that light to open your heart and let the darkness simply melt away. The words were coming out perfectly. I'd rehearsed them a dozen times. They were simple, comforting, and utterly, damningly false. And perhaps, on some level, my soul could no longer tolerate the lie. It began not as a pain, but as a deep, discordant hum in the center of my chest. It was a low, ugly vibration, like a bass string being tightened to the point of snapping. I tried to ignore it, to push through the final lines of my monologue. The prompter was rolling, the audience was captivated. But the hum grew louder, more insistent. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead under the heat of the studio lights. A crushing weight, immense and terrifying, began to settle on my chest, as if the entire studio roof were collapsing in on me. My carefully crafted words faltered. I lost my place on the prompter. My vision started to swim, the bright, smiling faces in the audience blurring into a grotesque, wavering smear of color. I could hear Jenna's voice in my earpiece, sharp and alarmed. Sam, what is it? Are you okay?" I tried to respond, to signal that something was terribly wrong, but my body was no longer my own. I gripped the arm of the comfortable chair I was sitting in, the fabric feeling alien under my touch. I opened my mouth, but only a strangled gasp came out. The crushing weight on my chest became an explosion of blinding, white-hot agony. It felt as if my heart was tearing itself apart. The last thing I saw was the unblinking red light of camera 2. A single, judgmental eye broadcasting my utter loss of control, my pathetic human frailty, to millions of viewers. And then that red light was swallowed by an encroaching, absolute darkness. My carefully produced world, my brand, my very life went to black. The darkness was not an ending, it was a stripping away. The chaos of my public death, the shouting, the agony, the terror, it all dissolved into a silence so profound it was a presence in itself. The persona of Father Sam, the charismatic smile, the soothing voice, the best-selling author, all of it slewed off me like a heavy, ill-fitting costume. All that remained was Samuel, a single, terrified point of awareness, naked and trembling in the vast, silent dark. For a moment that stretched into an eternity, there was nothing. No light, no sound, no body, no thought. It was the ultimate green room, the silence before the true show began. The fear I had just experienced was gone, replaced by a deep and abiding peace. But it was not the easy, placid peace I had preached about. It was a formidable, powerful peace, the peace of absolute reality. And then it began. It started not as a sight, but as a sound. A single, impossibly pure note, like a tuning fork struck in the heart of the void. It came from no direction, for it was everywhere at once. It was the fundamental frequency of existence itself. And as I listened, my awareness expanding to meet it, that single note was joined by another, and another, and another. Soon, I was immersed in a symphony. It was a composition of infinite complexity and breathtaking beauty. I was not so much listening to it as I was in it. I understood, with a clarity that made all my earthly knowledge seem like a child scrawling, that this was the music of creation. This was reality. Every single thing was a note, an instrument playing its part in the Great Symphony. I could perceive the souls, billions upon billions of them, not as points of light, but as individual instruments. I could hear the deep, resonant, ancient cellos of souls who had lived many lives, their music rich with the wisdom of experience. I could hear the bright, clear, soaring flutes of innocence, the souls of children and those with pure hearts, their notes like silver threads weaving through the composition. I could hear the steady, rhythmic timpani of the protector, the souls who dedicated their lives to defending others, providing a powerful, grounding beat for the entire orchestra. I could hear the playful violins, the mournful oboes, the triumphant brass. It was everything, everyone, all playing at once. And when they played in concert, when they listened to each other and to the music that flowed through them, they created harmony. They created chords of such exquisite, soul-shattering beauty that the music itself seemed to weep with joy. I heard a chord of pure forgiveness, played when one soul truly let go of a grievance against another, and its beauty was so powerful it healed the other instruments around it. I heard the swelling, glorious crescendo of selfless, sacrificial love, and it was a sound so magnificent it became the very foundation upon which the rest of the symphony was built. But the symphony was not perfect. With a dawning, sickening horror, I began to hear the dissonance. There were instruments that were playing out of tune, their notes sour and flat, grating against the harmony. These were the souls lost in despair, in self-pity, their music a miserable, lonely drone. There were instruments that were playing the wrong notes entirely, deliberately striking chords of selfishness and ego. Their music was a jarring, ugly clang that caused the other instruments nearby to recoil in pain. And there were those who refused to play at all, their silence creating an empty, hollow ache in the music, a void where a beautiful note was supposed to be. The most terrible sounds were the notes of deliberate cruelty. When one soul intentionally harmed another, it was not just a wrong note, it was a screeching, violent sound, like a violin bow being scraped across a nerve. It sent a shockwave of pain through the entire orchestra, causing other instruments to falter, to lose their place in the music, to forget the beautiful melody they were meant to play. The symphony was a constant, cosmic struggle between harmony and dissonance. And then I felt the presence of the conductor. He was not on a podium. He held no baton. He was the symphony itself. He was the silence between the notes, the rhythm in the beat, the divine score from which all the music originated. Christ was the composer, the mind and heart from which this infinite, beautiful and wounded piece of music had flowed. I could not see him, but I felt his being with every fiber of my own. I felt his infinite, patient love for every single instrument, no matter how out of tune, and I felt his sorrow. It was a sorrow that transcended all human emotion. It was the sorrow of a composer hearing his masterpiece, his life's work, being mangled and disfigured. He had written a part for every instrument, a beautiful, unique melody that was essential to the whole. And he wept with a silent, cosmic grief for every player who refused to play their part, for every beautiful note that was lost to the noise of fear and selfishness. His attention then turned to me, to my own small instrument in the vast orchestra. I was a well-made instrument, a finely crafted violin, and I was shown the music of my life. In my youth, in the seminary, I had played with a passion, pure, heartfelt melody that, while simple, was in perfect harmony with the conductor's score. But then I was shown the music of Father Sam. It was technically perfect. I hit all the right notes. My melody was pleasing, easy to listen to, and very, very popular. But it was hollow. It had no soul. I was not listening to the conductor. I was playing to the audience. I was watching their reactions, adjusting my tempo, my dynamics, to give them what they wanted to hear. My music added no real harmony to the Great Symphony. It was just noise. Pleasant, marketable, but ultimately meaningless noise. The books I had written, the shows I had produced, they were like simplified sheet music, the difficult and beautiful parts of the composition edited out for easy listening. The shame was absolute. It was the shame of an artist who realizes he has prostituted his art. I had been given a Stradivarius, and I had used it to play advertising jingles. In the depths of my shame, I felt the conductor's presence envelop me. It was not a word of forgiveness, but a silent, loving gesture of turning my attention back to the score. He was not angry. He was simply waiting patiently for me to start playing my real music. He showed me that my purpose was not to be a famous soloist. It was to listen to the Great Symphony and to play my own small part as beautifully and as honestly as I could. And in doing so, to help the other instruments around me find their own notes, to help them rejoin the harmony. That was my true calling, not to be a star, but to be a musician. With this profound, earth-shattering understanding came a desperate, burning need. I had to go back. I had to pick up my instrument. I had to play. The summons back was a crescendo of violence. The sublime harmonies of the symphony were torn away, replaced by a brutal, rhythmic pounding. The feeling of being pulled was immense, a force dragging my consciousness from a state of pure music back into the clumsy, discordant world of flesh and bone. The impact was a percussive blast of agony. I was slammed back into my body, and the symphony was replaced by the cacophony of the hospital. The steady, rhythmic pounding was someone performing chest compressions. The piercing shriek was the sound of a defibrillator charging. A voice shouted clear, and my entire body was seized by a bolt of raw, searing electricity. It was an agony so profound, it was almost sublime. Then the noise of the world flooded in. Beeping machines, urgent voices, the clatter of medical equipment. My body was a universe of pain. My chest felt as though it had been kicked in by a horse. A tube was scraping the inside of my throat. I was alive, and it was excruciating. My eyes fluttered open to the glare of fluorescent lights. A nurse's face, etched with concern, swam into view. "Father Samuel, can you hear us? You had a massive heart attack. We got you back." She said it with a triumphant smile. They had won. They had snatched me from the jaws of death. But I was grieving. I was an exile from a reality so beautiful it made the waking world seem like a pale, ugly shadow. The media storm began before I was even moved out of the emergency room. My public death and miraculous resurrection were a ratings goldmine. My producer, Jenna, was one of the first people I saw when I was coherent enough to recognize faces in the ICU. She was holding my hand, her eyes filled with a mixture of genuine concern and professional calculation. "Sam, my God, you scared us all to death," she said. "The whole world is praying for you. The network is overwhelmed." The ratings from that last show, they're astronomical. When you're better, we're planning a primetime special. Father Sam, return from the light. It's going to be huge. I looked at her kind, smart, ambitious face, and I saw a woman who was a brilliant player in an orchestra she couldn't hear. I tried to speak, my voice a dry, painful rasp. "Jenna, the music." "Don't try to talk, Sam," she said soothingly. "Just rest, we'll handle everything." They handled everything. They managed the press, they issued statements, they started pre-production on my return from the light. For weeks I recovered, my body slowly mending. But my soul was in a state of revolution. The cheerful platitudes I used to peddle now tasted like ash in my mouth. The thought of going back on television and performing my old act filled me with a sense of dread that was worse than the memory of the heart attack itself. The meeting with the network executives took place a month later in a sterile hospital conference room. Jenna was there, along with two vice presidents in expensive suits. They were all smiles, armed with charts and marketing plans. "Sam, it's great to see you looking so well," the senior VP began. "We're all set for the special. We have a list of talking points. We want you to focus on the feeling of peace, the white light, the message of hope. We need to keep it positive, on brand." I took a sip of water, my hand trembling slightly. I looked at their expectant faces. "There was no white light," I said, my voice quiet but clear. The smiles faltered. "What?" Jenna asked. "There was music," I said, "and there was dissonance. There was harmony, and there was a terrible, terrible pain. The pain of the whole world all at once." I tried to explain what I had seen, what I had heard. I spoke of the Great Symphony, of the conductor's sorrow, of the jarring, ugly notes of selfishness and cruelty. I told them that the message I was given was not that everything was going to be okay. The message was that we had a profound, urgent responsibility to play our part better, to listen to each other, to stop adding to the dissonance. I spoke for 10 minutes. When I finished, there was a heavy, uncomfortable silence in the room. The executives exchanged nervous glances. Jenna stared at her notepad, refusing to meet my eyes. Finally, the senior VP cleared his throat. "Well, Father, that's quite a story. It's very vivid. But I think you'll agree it's not exactly primetime material. It's dark, it's complicated. Our audience wants inspiration, not a lecture on cosmic dissonance." "It's the truth," I said simply. Jenna finally looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Sam, please, this is your career. This is the brand we've built for 10 years. People need the old Father Sam, the hopeful one." "The old Father Sam was a liar," I whispered. "A well-intentioned one, perhaps, but a liar nonetheless. I can't play that music anymore." The ultimatum was delivered gently, but it was an ultimatum all the same. I could do the special their way, get back to my show, and continue to be the beloved Father Sam. Or I could refuse, and the network would have to reevaluate our partnership. The choice was between my brand and my soul. For the first time in a very long time, the choice was clear. My show was canceled 2 weeks later, citing health concerns. My book contract was terminated. The media storm, once adoring, turned critical. I was a has-been, a man who had cracked under pressure. My celebrity evaporated, my fortune dwindled. I moved out of the penthouse and into a small, nondescript apartment in a quiet, forgotten part of the valley. The silence was deafening. For months, I was adrift in a sea of obscurity. The loneliness was a physical ache. I had spent a decade speaking to millions, and now I spoke to no one. I was an instrument in a locked case. The doubt was a constant, insidious whisper. Did I imagine it all? Was it just a hallucination, a grand delusion brought on by cardiac arrest? Did I throw away my life for nothing? To keep the despair at bay, I started going to open mic nights at small, dingy coffee houses and bars. I never performed. I just sat in the back, nursing a single cup of coffee and listened. I listened to the raw, untutored voices of young poets, the clumsy, heartfelt chords of amateur guitarists, the hopeful, trembling melodies of aspiring singers. Most of it was not technically good, but it was honest. It was real music. Each performer, in their own small way, was playing their note in the Great Symphony. They were my new church, my new teachers. One evening, I was at a place called the Tuning Fork. The last performer of the night was a young woman named Chloe. She had a guitar that had seen better days and a voice that was pure, clear, and filled with a sorrow so profound it made the air in the room feel heavy. She sang a song she had written, a song about loneliness and feeling invisible. She played with a technical skill that was leagues above everyone else, but her performance was hesitant, almost apologetic, as if she didn't believe anyone was really listening. When she finished, there was a smattering of polite applause from the handful of people in the audience. She gave a small, sad smile, packed up her guitar, and headed for the door. I felt a compulsion I couldn't explain. I followed her outside. She was standing under a street lamp, the light catching the glisten of tears on her cheeks. "Excuse me," I said gently. She looked up startled. "Oh, hi. My name is Samuel," I said. "What you played in there, it was beautiful." She gave a bitter little laugh. "Yeah, beautiful. All 6 people in the room thought so. I'm quitting. I can't do this anymore. What's the point of playing if no one hears you?" Her words struck me with the force of a physical blow. What's the point of playing if no one hears you? It was the question of every lost and lonely soul. "Can I tell you something strange?" I asked. "I'm a priest, or I used to be." She looked at me, intrigued. We ended up talking for over an hour, sitting on a cold park bench. I didn't preach, I just told her my story. I told her about the Great Symphony, about the infinite orchestra, and about the divine conductor who hears every single note, no matter how quiet. "Your song, Chloe," I said, my voice filled with the absolute certainty of what I had witnessed. "That wasn't just a performance in a coffee shop. That was your instrument playing its part, and it was a heartbreakingly beautiful melody. And the dissonance you feel, the loneliness, that's the sound of other instruments being out of tune. But your note was pure harmony. And I promise you, in the place where the real music happens, the conductor heard you, and he wept with joy." She stared at me, her eyes wide. He was a musician. She understood the metaphor in a way no one else could. She started to cry, not with the quiet tears of sadness from before, but with great, shuddering sobs of release, of recognition. It was the sound of an instrument that thought it was broken, realizing it was just waiting to be played in the right key. In that moment, under a flickering street lamp in a forgotten corner of Lowe's Angels, I finally understood my new purpose. I no longer had a television studio or a bestseller list. My audience was now an audience of one. My job was not to entertain the crowd, but to sit with the lonely violin, the forgotten flute, the silent cello, and remind them that they are a vital, irreplaceable part of the most beautiful music ever written. I still live in this small apartment. I write, not for publication, but for myself to remember the truth. My life is quiet now. By the standards of the world, by the standards of the man I once was, I am a failure. But some evenings I go down to the Tuning Fork or a dozen other places like it. I listen to the music. I listen to the fragile, brave, dissonant, and occasionally beautiful notes of humanity. And I find the ones who have forgotten their own song. My work now is slow. It is one soul at a time. For every Chloe I meet, there are 1,000 others I can never reach. The loneliness of my path is profound. But it is not the empty loneliness of my old penthouse. It is a full loneliness, a solitude infused with purpose. When the doubt creeps in, I close my eyes and I listen. And sometimes, if I am very still, I can hear it, a faint, distant echo of the Great Symphony. It is enough. It is my daily bread. The great revelation was never about a life after death. It was about the music in this life. Faith is not about believing in a list of doctrines. It is the courageous act of picking up your instrument and playing your own authentic note, as beautifully as you can, in a world full of noise. It is the choice in every moment to add to the harmony, not the dissonance. One day, my own instrument will fall silent. My part in the symphony will be over. And I will return to the great silence from which all music is born. And I will stand before the divine conductor. I hope he will not judge me for my fame or my failures, but simply say, "Welcome to the orchestra. I have been waiting to hear your song." And now I turn to you, who have held this story in your hands. I have shared the music of my soul, not for applause, but because all music longs to be heard. And so I ask you this: what instrument are you? And what music are you playing with the life you have been given? Are you listening to the Great Symphony, or are you just adding to the noise? Are you playing the song the conductor wrote for you, or the one you think the audience wants to hear? I don't ask you to believe me. I only ask you to listen. Listen to the music within yourself and within others. The time to choose harmony over dissonance is now. The symphony is playing. And the choice, as it always has been and always will be, is ours. Thank you for listening.